Hello, my name is Matthew Streeter, and in 5 minutes, I'm going to tell you why I don't think there's actually any contradiction between the Bible and its account of creation and Darwin's theory of organic evolution. To give you a little background about me and my thoughts and feelings initially on this subject, when I was growing up as a child, I was very deeply religious, believed the Bible, still do, of course, and I was also really into science, and I would actually watch a lot of animal documentaries and things like that as a child. Basically, anytime evolution came up, I would shut it out because I believed at the time that it was not compatible with my beliefs and with the Bible. And I continued to do this throughout my life. I even argued with my teachers in high school, and eventually I came to a point in my life and as an adult where I realized that there was a lot of evidence for evolution, and at first this led to a bit of a crisis for me because I felt like my faith was being undermined the more evidence that I encountered that supported evolution. And so after a lot of prayer and a lot of soul searching, I came to the conclusion that actually the two aren't in conflict, which might sound a bit surprising to you because you might think, well, clearly the two don't go together because the Genesis narrative doesn't really match the theory, the scientific theory, and the timeline doesn't match 7 days versus millions of years, and also the idea of evolution through natural selection, which would involve death and competition, and often as Christians we perceive there being no death prior to Adam's fall. So I just want to quickly address each of these concerns because when I came to these conclusions, it made a lot of sense to me. So first, I want you to think about how God creates the world in Genesis. He doesn't create the world the way we would create something like if we're a carpenter, create a table, if we're a sculptor creating a pot. He's not a craftsman that uses his hands. He creates by command through his divine authority. So if you look at the very beginning of the creation story, God says, "Let there be light," and there was light. So think about that. God commands, and the elements obey based on his authority. So when it's time for him to create a world and fill it with life, he commands that it be filled with life, and the elements comply based on his authority. And they do what you might expect from elements that are given a command and respond to God's divine authority, which is they start with the most basic life forms, something like a single-celled organism, and gradually move to the more and more complex, and in order to fulfill his command to fill the world with life. So then you might ask, well, what about the idea of this timeline? So Genesis says 7 days. And I think, I'm not going to dwell a long time on this because I think a lot's been said about it already. So first of all, if God hadn't created, according to the account, the sun or the moon yet, or any of the cosmic bodies surrounding the earth, what's the real meaning of a day? Well, not 24 hours, that wouldn't make sense. The last and maybe the most important point. So what about this idea that there was no mortality before the fall? Well, I want you to think about the fact that Adam was created from the dust of the earth. And what does that mean? Well, it's a symbol of his mortality. Once he died, he would return to the dust. And I feel like this is a symbol that he was created mortal. What other evidence is there that he was mortal initially? Well, think about when he was placed in the Garden of Eden. There's two trees, the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. And we're not really told anything about the tree of life until Adam's driven out of the Garden of Eden, and there's angels that have to protect it so that he can no longer have access to the tree of life and its fruit. So why would that be necessary? For a long time I wondered about this. I thought, why was the tree of life there at all? Adam and Eve were immortals. What benefit did they gain from the tree of life? Did they eat the fruit, etc.? And finally I came to my own personal conclusion, which you can decide if you agree with or disagree with, but that they were created as mortals and they were sustained as immortals through having access to the tree of life. And that interpretation to me helps to explain why then they were barred from the tree of life later. Given all that context, I believe that there's no contradiction between the two, and I feel like that we as Christians will be on a more firm foundation if we're not trying to attack science or engage in a conflict, but simply just let science operate and do what it does, and we'll continue in our faith and realize that the two aren't necessarily incompatible. So I'll leave you with that and say, if you're interested in what I have to say, look for more. View my blog, turnnotaside.blogspot.com.